Know what I've been thinking about a lot lately? That time Lex Luthor became the President of the United States. Totally random. Anyway, do you remember that outlandish science fiction storyline from superhero comics? When an amoral, corrupt, criminal businessman, motivated by grievance, jealousy, and unchecked lusts for power and respect, got himself elected president? Ha 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 ha! I'm dying. The President Lex storyline began in DC Comics with the one-shot Superman Lex 2000 #1, which has a cover date of January 2001, but was actually originally published on November 8, 2000, which, fun fact, was the day after our real-life election day in the United States. The one where, eventually, George W. Bush was elected. Superman Lex 2000 contains 5 stories, all pertaining to Lex Luthor's election as president. 4 of the stories are written by Jeff Loeb, with the other written by Greg Rucka, and the issue features art by pencilers Tony Harris, Dwayne Turner, Doug Mankey, Ed McGuinness, and Tony Nauck, and inkers Ray Snyder, Danny Meeke, Walden Wong, Cam Smith, and Klaus Janson. The first story in the issue, Lex Luthor Triumph Over Tragedy, by Loeb, Harris, and Snyder, catches us up on Lex's road to the White House. It's presented in the form of a short documentary about Lex's life and family history produced for a TV news broadcast. Only it hasn't been broadcast yet. It's revealed on the final page that Lex, who has just been declared the president-elect, has been given an advance copy of the documentary and is watching it so he can tell Cat Grant, who is anchoring the coverage of his election, what parts of the documentary he wants changed in order to make himself look better. A journalist allowing a politician to dictate how the press reports on him? That's so far-fetched. The next story in the issue is about Batman visiting Lex's office to demand that he hand over his kryptonite ring. But Lex just kinda doesn't, because he's the president now, and he can do whatever he wants, including sick the NSA, CIA, and FBI on Batman. And Batman leaves? It's not a great story, to be honest. Plus, seriously, a president threatening to use the federal government's law enforcement and intelligence apparatus to attack his personal enemies? I know this is a fantasy, but come on. Alright, I'm going to try not to keep making that same joke, even though I could for literally every other story in this comic book. The next story shows us the newsroom of the Daily Planet on election night, right when the race is officially called for Lex. Perry White comes storming out of his office, announces that Lex is going to be president, compares it to other proud moments in American history, such as the JFK assassination and the Challenger explosion, then tells his reporters to get to work, saying, just because this country is about to go to hell in a handbasket doesn't mean this newspaper does too. See the tears welling up in Perry's eyes in this wonderful close-up by Mankey and Wong? That's because he cares about his country and what's about to happen to it with Lex Luthor as the president. He's seen hard times before, and he worries they're about to go through some more, and he's emotionally affected by that because he views his newspaper as something important that matters. Not just a source of vacuous content intended only to attract attention and generate revenue for the owners by any means necessary. Isn't that weird? What a weirdo. You're a weirdo, Perry. Caring about things. The next story is about Superman smashing up one of Saturn's moons to take out his frustration over the United States, electing a man like Lex Luthor to be the president. Mood. And finally, there's a story about Superman paying a late-night visit to his old childhood friend Lana Lang, who is married to Superman's other old childhood friend, Pete Ross, who, fun fact, was Lex's running mate and is now the vice president-elect. Small fucking world, right? Superman has come to ask Lana why she and Pete are working with Lex Luthor of all people when Lana knows firsthand how evil Luthor is. Lana's answer: they've been unable to prove Lex's crimes in the past, despite repeated efforts to do so. Maybe the only way to stop Lex from doing his worst is to stop fighting against him and start working with him. Lex Luthor is a bad man, Lana says, a bad man who is now President of the United States, but my husband is a good man. Maybe with him right there, on the inside, there won't be any more bad things. Or maybe, she adds after Superman leaves, speaking now only to her baby son asleep in his crib, maybe something bad will happen to Luthor while he's in office, and your daddy will be the president, and everyone will be happy. Solid plan, Lana. Good work. Other highlights of the early days of Lex Luthor's presidency come from Secret Files and Origins, President Luthor, which has this awesome cover by Tony Harris and Ray Snyder, and also includes several stories. They're not all worth mentioning, but I think two are. One, The Why, written by Greg Rucka, penciled by Matthew Clark, and inked by Ray Snyder, is an almost entirely wordless story, definitively establishing what we all assumed already, namely that Lex's primary motivation for running for president was to one-up Superman. The other, Most Suitable Person, also written by Rucka, with pencils by Dale Eaglesham and inks by Ray Crissing, details Lex's efforts to persuade Talia, that would be Ra's al Ghul's daughter, Talia, to take over running his company, LexCorp, while he serves as president. And the funny thing about this is that even though Lex has chosen to turn his company over to a trained assassin whose primary previous executive experience is running her father's international criminal organization, and even though Lex pressures a reluctant Talia to take the job by staging an assassination attempt at her house and then also staging her rescue from that assassination attempt, an operation that ended with the deaths of 17 people, the mere fact that Lex chooses on his own to step away from his private company to avoid the appearance of any conflict of interest during his presidency makes him appear more ethical than the guy we just elected. And also a lot smarter, because there's no way the guy we just elected would be able to pull off that staged assassination/rescue deal without everyone finding out. He'd still get away with it, thanks to the Supreme Court, but everybody would know because of his gross incompetence. Hey, since this is theoretically a video in a series about Superman, some of you who haven't actually read these comics are probably wondering how Superman reacted to all of this, other than by pulverizing a moon of Saturn. I mean, Superman, who spent his life standing for truth, justice, and the American way, now has to face the reality that the American people had chosen his archenemy, his antithesis, a man he knows to be dangerous and evil as their head of state. How'd he take it? Not great. Adventures of Superman number 586, the January 2001 issue, written by J.M. DeMatteis, penciled by Mike Miller, and inked by Armando Durruti and Walden Wong, opens on Superman standing on a rooftop, looking over the city of Metropolis, bitterly muttering to himself about the unwelcome reality of President Luthor. Then his face hardens into an angry scowl and he takes off through the city, landing at Luthor's campaign headquarters. He throws open the doors, marches across the floor up onto the stage where Lex Luthor himself is standing. He gets up in Luthor's face, glares at him coldly, and says, "I just came to tell you, congratulations, Mr. President," and they shake hands. He's in a room full of people. Lex Luthor voters, but still technically people. He's not going to traumatize and possibly endanger them by punching Lex's head off his shoulders right there. You have any idea how lethal a projectile, a human head punched through the air by Superman would be? I'd like to know that, actually. Man, they canceled Mythbusters too soon. Superman angrily swooping over to Lex's campaign headquarters only to pull up short and congratulate him for the sake of, I don't know, good sportsmanship is a pretty good fake out, or would have been if it hadn't have been spoiled by the cover, but you know, comic books have been doing that for decades. The cover scene is either something that doesn't happen in the actual story at all, or a very specific and important scene that the audience shouldn't know about before they read the story. What are you going to do? The calculation that Superman makes as far as his public-facing relationship with President Luthor is interesting and will probably seem familiar to most of us in light of recent events. And by recent events, I mean the last 10 goddamn years of our lives. Superman knows that Lex Luthor is an evil bastard, but at this point in the history of the DC Universe, this particular version of the DC universe. I think this is still way back in Reboot 1 or Reboot 2, depending on how you count 0 Hour. The public is not aware of who Lex really is and what sort of criminal shenanigans he gets up to. So, instead of fighting with the new president, Superman decides to play nice when people are watching, and to even try and work with President Lex in situations where that's feasible, or, more often, unavoidable. Lex isn't just the President of the United States. He's the only President of the United States, which makes him kind of difficult to avoid. Outside of the public eye, however, Superman makes no pretense of how he feels about President Lex. In Superman number 165, the February 2001 issue, written by Jeff Loeb with art by an all-star team including pencilers Ed McGuinness, Joe Madureira, Mike Wieringo, Rob Liefeld, and Ian Churchill, and inkers Cam Smith, Norm Rapmund, Wayne Foucher, and Art Adams, Supes spends his Christmas, the month before Luthor's inauguration, having a series of informal therapy sessions with his fellow superheroes. Hanging out at Justice League headquarters with Martian Manhunter and Plastic Man, Supes says, "How could the American people even think about electing Lex Luthor?" suggesting that perhaps his famously good vision has been obscured by his idealism just a bit. Martian Manhunter shares that the election result makes him feel alienated from humanity, but in a way that he's grateful for. Plastic Man chimes in to remind Supes that, hey, it could be worse. There could be 2 President Luthors, which I'm not too sure about, constitutionally speaking, though it does get a grin out of Supes, so that's not nothing, I guess. Next, Supes drops in for a visit with Aquaman, who tells him that he doesn't have a problem with President Luthor because Lex has promised to open trade relations between the United States and Atlantis, the first time a head of state from the surface world has ever done that. Aquaman knows who Lex is and what he's about, but if Lex's presidency will be good for Atlantis, that's all he cares about. Superman says, "You know, Lex only said those things to you because he was running for president. They're empty campaign promises." And Aquaman replies, "They had better not be." Ooh, what are you going to do, Arthur? Send some fish after him? I know this is the serious, badass, modern-age Aquaman, not the silly Super Friends version, so... Ooh, what are you going to do? Send some fish after him while having long hair and making an angry face? I'm sure that'll intimidate the guy who goes out of his way as often as possible to give the finger to Superman. Supes talks over the election with Green Lantern as they deal with a falling satellite. Green Lantern declares that all politicians are basically the same, and sure, Lex is a crook, but so was the last guy probably, and whoever replaces Lex probably will be too, which is the sort of breezily bleak, know-nothing, know-it-all take you might expect from a guy with a cosmic power ring who can just leave planet Earth whenever he wants. No wonder nobody votes, GL says. But you vote, right? Superman asks. Well, sure, I vote, answers Green Lantern. What kind of a gigantic piece of shit do you take me for anyway? Even though he doesn't think his vote will make a difference, Green Lantern still votes, because he hopes it will. Superman tells him, where I grew up, if you didn't have hope, you didn't have anything. Continuing his holiday rounds, Superman goes for a run with The Flash, who says he voted because, for better or worse, he believes in the American way. Having said that, he also tells Supes, if you decide to drag Luthor kicking and screaming out of the Oval Office, I'm right there with you. Superman says, no, I'm not going to drag him out of the White House because, for better or worse, I believe in the American system too. Supes, that's the kind of talk that had people switching to Marvel in the 60s. Just saying. Superman meets up with Wonder Woman in Antarctica, where they have an intensely erotic wrestling match, and Wonder Woman tells Supes to stop obsessing over President Lex and go spend some time with his wife. Put that boner he's been trying to hide since they started grappling to some good use. Next, Superman visits Batman. I don't think it's boner related. Batman just reminds Superman that before the election, he told Batman that they should put their faith in the American people to do the right thing. Then he tells Superman, when the time is right, we'll take down Luthor. Pretty big talk from the guy who completely ate shit when he tried to get Lex's kryptonite ring, but at least he's got the right idea. Finally, Superman takes a holiday with Lois in the bottle city of Kandor. She asks him, so you're okay with you-know-who being the you-know-what? And Superman says, yes, for now, I have to be. I wonder what Captain America is up to. So yeah, not exactly Superman's most shining moment, but in a classic case of better late than never, Superman does eventually get around to taking down President Luthor. He does it with some help from his old pal Batman, and it all begins in earnest with the first issue of the Superman and Batman team-up series, ingeniously titled Superman/Batman. Don't hurt yourselves. Which would be the October 2003 issue. It's written by Jeff Loeb, who was legally required to write every superhero comic in the early years of the 21st century, with pencils by Ed McGuinness and inks by Dexter Vines, and it's the first installment of a 6-part story arc called The World's Finest. Again, don't strain your brain too hard coming up with titles, Jeff. Superman and eventually Batman spend most of the first issue fighting with Metallo. Meanwhile, President Lex Luthor officially announces his candidacy for re-election and deals with a sudden crisis in the form of a humongous kryptonite asteroid that has recently been discovered on a collision course with Earth. Captain Atom is on hand, along with Major Force and several other superhero types who remain hidden in the shadows, although one of them is definitely a Green Lantern. Guess what the giveaway is? Captain Atom advises President Luthor to inform Superman about the kryptonite asteroid immediately, but Lex is like, ain't nobody informing Superman about shit. The existence of this asteroid is classified, and it's going to stay that way. We will handle it. This time, we will save Superman. Well, that's really nice of you, Lex, and I can tell you mean that. Part 2 of The World's Finest begins with Batman dragging Superman through the sewers to the Batcave so Alfred can remove a kryptonite bullet which Metallo shot him with in Part 1. There's going to be a lot of kryptonite-related business in this one, I can tell already. While Supes is in the Batcave, going under the Bat Knife, President Lex is launching nuclear missiles at the asteroid. Captain Atom scolds Lex for using a boom tube to launch the missiles. Boom tubes are a technology used on the planet Apocalypse by the likes of Darkseid, and they're illegal on Earth, so it's super sketch that Lex would even have one. But Lex throws it back in Captain Atom's face, like if we launched the missiles the old-fashioned way, they'd never make it to the asteroid in time. So are you saying I should have not used the illegal technology and let the gigantic chunk of kryptonite smash into our planet and kill everybody? Is that what you're saying? It winds up not making much of a difference since the missiles impact the asteroid and have no effect. It isn't destroyed, it isn't knocked off course. Nice going, Lex. You just wasted 3 nuclear missiles. We've only got 5,000 more of those, man. Meanwhile, in the Batcave, Superman is feeling much better after having that kryptonite bullet removed, but then he and Batman get a surprise visit from future Superman. He's the Superman from the future, and he is pissed off. Apparently, Superman, present-day Superman, is about to do something which he thinks is the right thing, but will just end up getting everyone he cares about killed. So his future self has come back in time to stop present-day Superman by killing him, which would also be killing himself, since if present-day Superman dies, there ain't going to be no future Superman, but you try telling him that. There's just no talking to him when he gets like this. Future Superman is about to kill Batman when present-day Superman tries to stop him by shooting him with the same piece of kryptonite Alfred just dug out of his chest. But the bullet just passes through future Superman as he begins to fade away, presumably returning to the future. I guess his time travel was only for a limited time. Before he disappears, he warns present-day Superman to beware of Lex. Good information, thanks for that. Having failed to blow up or derail the kryptonite asteroid, President Lex is moving on to Plan B. He goes on TV and gives an address where he reveals the existence of the asteroid, describes the dire threat it represents to humanity, and, since it's a big chunk of the planet Krypton, blames the entire thing on Superman and puts a $1 billion bounty on Superman's head, charging him with crimes against humanity. As Part 3 opens, Superman and Batman are on their way to the White House when they are intercepted by a team of supervillains, including Silver Banshee and all of the cold-themed ones who were available. Mr. Freeze, Captain Cold, icicle, killer frost. While Soups and Bats try to fight their way through, inside the White House, President Lex is sitting for a televised interview with Lois Lane. Ace reporter that she is, Lois opens with the obvious question: what evidence does Lex have that Superman is responsible for the big kryptonite asteroid? Lex says, oh, there's evidence, all right. There's so much evidence, irrefutable evidence, and we have compiled so much irrefutable evidence that once people see this evidence, they'll conclude that whatever this administration does to Superman is totally justified. Lois is like, can you tell us what the evidence is? And Lex says, nope. Back outside, Superman and Batman overcome the first wave of villains only to be met by more. Mongol, Solomon Grundy, Lady Shiva, Nightshade. It turns out they, and a whole mess more bad guys still lurking in the woods, are being mentally controlled from the top of the Washington Monument by Grodd, the super-intelligent telepathic gorilla. Now, what other genre besides superhero comics would allow me to write that sentence? Come on, how do you not love this shit? They take out Grodd, but then all the assembled villains just attack on their own. But then, suddenly, the day is saved. A band of heroes comes to the rescue. It's Captain Atom, Major Force, and the other heroes we saw in the shadows at the end of Part 1. They turn out to be Green Lantern John Stewart, Starfire, Black Lightning, Katana, and Power Girl. Captain Atom announces that they haven't come to rescue Superman and Batman. They've come to arrest them because they work for the president. Quite the team you've assembled there, Lex. Were Rocket Red and the Phantom Stranger not available? Part 4, Superman and Batman go on the run. They eventually get captured by Shazam and Hawkman. Meanwhile, Lex is secretly injecting himself with something, and whatever it is, it's making him kinda nuts. He kisses Amanda Waller. I'm not saying it's unthinkable that Lex would find her attractive. I'm just saying the suddenness with which he puts the moves on her feels a little nuts. And Waller seems to agree. Part 5, Lex announces that Superman and Batman have been captured, which leads a bunch of their allies, including Superboy, Supergirl, Steel, not the original Steel, John Henry Irons' niece, Robin, Nightwing, Huntress, and Batgirl to storm the White House, determined to get them out. Only it turns out Lex doesn't actually have Superman or Batman in custody, nor does he know where they are. But he goes ahead and captures these heroic intruders, beating them with a combination of traps, knockout gas, and his own suspiciously prodigious strength. Shazam and Hawkman arrive at the White House, only it turns out they aren't actually Shazam and Hawkman. They're Superman and Batman in disguise. Apparently, as Superman breathlessly explains through narration, sometime between issues 4 and 5, Superman and Batman were able to overpower Shazam and Hawkman and steal their costumes. Sounds like it was no big deal, since it wasn't even worth showing us. Superman gets Lex by the neck and seems angry enough that he might actually kill him. Lex says, go ahead, kill me. Murder the President of the United States. Prove to the world you're just as dangerous as I've always said you are. Condemn yourself and all your superhero pals to being fugitives for the rest of your lives. Do it. And Batman's standing right there saying, yeah, do it. I'm not going to stop you. We can make it look like an accident. But Superman is still Superman. He doesn't kill Lex. He just chucks him into a wall. Then Superman and Batman leave for Japan on urgent business that I'll explain in a second. Once they're gone, Lex gets up, gives himself another one of those injections, then unveils his big secret, his mechanized green and purple battle suit. His veins bulging an unhealthy green, eyes maniacally wide and also glowing green, Lex declares, you want someone killed right? You have to do it yourself. Part 6, the epic conclusion, begins with Superman and Batman meeting with Hiro Akamura, aka the Toy Man, who it is revealed they have secretly hired to build a rocket capable of destroying the giant kryptonite asteroid. It's a good thing the heroes did so many important things that we never got to see in order to move the plot forward, huh? Anyway, Toy Man is a genius, but being a teenager, he's also kind of a doofus, so he has designed his asteroid-killing rocket to look like an enormous half-Superman, half-Batman, which longtime comics nerds will immediately recognize as a reference to the composite Superman, one of the goofiest characters to come out of the deliriously goofy Silver Age of DC Comics. Superman, who is growing weaker by the minute thanks to the radiation from the approaching asteroid, announces that he will pilot the rocket. But then Captain Atom appears, and has he got a story? He's been to the future, the same future that future Superman came from, and he knows the mistake Superman and Batman made that fucked everything up. It was Superman flying the rocket. Captain Atom incapacitates Superman, then explains the situation to Batman. He can fly the rocket to the asteroid and not only destroy it, but use his energy-absorbing superpowers to vacuum up the radiation from the asteroid, which is the only way to truly protect the people of Earth from it. Batman goes for it, and Captain Atom takes off in the rocket. While the rocket flies out to meet the asteroid, Lex shows up in his battlesuit, and Superman wakes up so they can have their big fight. As they brawl, Lex announces that his suit was forged for him in the fire pits of Apocalypse. Superman's like, you made an alliance with Darkseid? He'll betray you the first time it suits him. But Lex is like, nah, me and Darkseid have been buddies since way back. He gave me all the technology I needed to keep America and myself strong. And he's the one who told me about the kryptonite asteroid, which will open humanity's eyes to the truth about you. As they continue to fight, and Lex delivers his deranged supervillain monologue, Superman narrates and ponders how he responded to Lex Luthor being elected president. If I'm guilty of one mistake, Superman says, it was trusting the American people not to vote for him. Go on. But what should I have done? Superman asks. Gone on television and told people not to vote for him? Yes. If I use my influence, my character and reputation to tell people how to vote, what does that make me? It makes you a trusted and respected public figure making a political endorsement. It's not that big a deal, dude. You totally should have done that. What the hell? How is that even a question in your mind at this point when you're fighting a crazed, superpowered President Lex Luthor in the skies above Metropolis? Superman destroys Lex's battlesuit and Lex crashes into his office in LexCorp Tower. Batman confronts him and then they have a fight, which Batman wins because Lex's super strength is waning and his battlesuit is broken. Batman also informs Lex that his confession to working with Darkseid for technology and to frame Superman for being responsible for the asteroid was broadcast to the entire world. I guess Superman was wearing a wire. So Lex is about to become the first American president to go to prison. Not so fast, Batman. Lex escapes via another boom tube. The percussion of the boom tube also topples LexCorp Tower. Fortunately, Superman was able to evacuate a 5-block radius around the building, preventing civilian casualties because this isn't a fucking Zack Snyder movie. Superman searches the rubble for Lex, but finds nothing. But with his crimes revealed to the world, President Lex is swiftly impeached and removed from office and criminally indicted, and Vice President Pete Ross assumes the presidency. I guess Lana Lang was right after all. Superman's name is cleared, President Lex is gone. Oh yeah, and the composite Superman rocket did destroy the asteroid, and Captain Atom did absorb most of its radiation, and he's probably dead now, which I'm sure was gutting for his legions of fans. So, the day is saved, and now everything can get back to normal. Except, on the last page, we see that Lex has survived. I guess it was a short-range boom tube, because he's underneath the rubble of LexCorp Tower, eyes still glowing green, still wearing the remnants of his battlesuit, staring out furiously and declaring, there will be a reckoning. A crisis. Actually, you know what? I'm good. So, to recap, a morally bankrupt criminal business tycoon motivated by ego and spite gets himself elected president based on empty promises to make everything great, attempts to deflect attention from his own crimes and corruption by whipping up public outcry against an immigrant, has his crimes and treasonous true loyalties exposed, is impeached and criminally indicted, but once he's out of office, he refuses to accept defeat and swears he'll come back and make his enemies pay. I take back everything I said earlier. This story isn't far-fetched at all. Write a sequel where Lex comes back and gets elected to a second term after all of this, and it'll be the most realistic superhero story ever published. Sadly, the most realistic part might be Superman's failure to stop Lex. Not because he didn't want to, not because he couldn't have, but because he felt like it wasn't his place. A dangerously unfit man became president because a good man who could have stopped him decided it was better not to try. And the added fact that the good man in this scenario is also a journalist? If this story were written, say, last year, I might consider it too on the nose, but since it was written over 20 years ago, I think I'll just call it prophetic. In the worst, most depressing ways. But just because it's depressing, that doesn't mean it's not also instructive. I didn't choose to spend most of this video talking about the story told through the first 6 issues of Superman/Batman because it's a good story. It's not. It's a lot of fun in a mindless, chaotic sort of way. The artwork by Ed McGuinness and Dexter Vines is gorgeous. The colors by Dave Stewart are vivid. It looks amazing. But the writing is pretty terrible. Multiple events important to the plot take place off-screen, as it were, and are hastily filled in after the fact through narration, and that plot frequently feels like little more than an excuse to include as many characters and as many winking references as possible. It's not Jeff Loeb at his best, and it's not Superman at his best. So why is it being featured in a series called Best Superman Ever? Because of what Superman at less than his best has to teach us in this moment. Superman initially felt okay about staying out of the election because he just couldn't believe that the American people would be so ignorant, so short-sighted, so clueless, so self-destructive, so gullible as to elect Lex Luthor. Unfortunately, for Superman and for many of us who thought something similar about an eerily similar real-life candidate, incredulity is not a superpower. It can be a weakness as dangerous as kryptonite, and one to which all people are potentially vulnerable, not just Superman.